Hey guys, Triple B here. Temporal Forces is coming out pretty soon. Pre-releases have actually started up this weekend. Did you end up going to one? But today we're going to be covering the buy list that I think you guys should be getting for this new set. The things that are going to be competitively viable and that might have a chance at coming up in the future. I am doing the video a little bit differently as to how we normally do it. Cuts down my editing time, well, fairly substantially, because trying to just do it all in one cut. So if you like the way that we're formatting it today, please let me know in the comments down below, or if you think it's kind of rubbish, either way, just let me know, and hopefully we can get it all ironed out, because it saves me a lot of time and means we can get you a lot more videos. First thing we're going to cover today, though, is the staple cards. First one up, Buddy Poffin. These are made with proxies I made as the set list was being revealed. So if you're wanting to get your hands on these, there'll be a link in the description of the video. You can get your hands on the cards a little bit early and start your playtesting. It's going to be called Buddy Poffin in the set, not just Buddy Poffin, but this is what we originally thought it was. Anywho, getting off track, this card's effectively our replacement for Battle VIP Pass. It's going to allow you to search your deck for 2 basic Pokemon with 70 HP or less and put them right onto your bench. It's not limited to just the first turn of the game though. It seems like a must-have for any evolution deck. Things like Charizard EX, you can get your Charmanders out, evolve them up, you're good, but 2 prize Pokemon like Miraidon aren't going to be able to abuse this, so it seems like a healthy way for the format to be going and definitely a card you should be picking up for your decks. The next one is Maximum Belt. It's a new Ace Spec card that allows you to do 50 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon EX. Scaling up your numbers, it's solid. Things like Giratina V-Star does 280. It's not one-shotting Charizard. Chuck a belt on it. Now it is. Then you go start Requiem, delete another one. It's a good card. Definitely a good card and can be slotted into a number of decks to fix up numbers. We've also got Prime Catcher. You've probably seen this card. It's likely the Ace Spec everyone's going to be running in most of their decks unless you're fixing up numbers with the belt. It's sort of like Guzma, which we had in the Sun and Moon format. Switch your opponent's bench Pokemon with their active, switch your active with one of your bench. Solid Gust, it's on an item card and seems like it can go into any deck, so definitely recommend picking this up. It's probably going to be a little pricey near release, so maybe wait for this one to come down. If you pull one, congrats, like that's just a win right there. We've also got Iron Leaves EX. This card is effectively the Charizard Slayer. It's got an ability that when you move it to the active, you can move any energy from your other Pokemon onto it. So if you have some grass energy in your deck, or maybe like, I was going to say Luminous energy, but that actually wouldn't work since if you have 2 of them and they shut each other off and you're kind of shot in the foot. If you can fit any grass energy in your deck though, so Giratina, which we already mentioned, they're running it. You could even just slot in 2 basic grass into decks that have things like Earthen Vessel to be able to pull them onto this. Seems like a great inclusion because it's going to do 180 damage, hit Charizard for weakness, that's 360, and down it goes. Definitely a great inclusion to have and a worthwhile tech to be able to access. Probably recommend picking up 1 or 2 of these. Mist Energy, another solid staple card to get your hands on. It's going to make it so effects of attacks don't impact your Pokemon. So, Giratina, we've already mentioned it before, Star Requiem declares you're knocked out. This says, no, I'm actually not, unless they can counter it with something like Temple of Sinnoh, or in the next format, we're going to be getting a reprint of Enhanced Hammer, so there is ways around it, but you're making your opponent work for it. Definitely a solid card to pick up. Likely recommend picking up probably 2. You can likely get away with just 1 in a deck, but having 2, it pays colorless energy cost, so if you've got colorless energy in attacks, having it on there just as a bit of a safety net, it's not a bad shout. Also helps into Roaring Moon, and there's probably some other things coming up in the future that it'll help you out into as well. We're getting a Dunsparce, and you're probably looking at me like, why is this on the staples? Well, the ability Dashing Draw just lets you bounce this guy back into your deck. So you draw 3 cards and then shuffle him back into your deck. It's also got a decent attack, doing 90 damage for 3 colorless, so if you have something that can just rush energy out, you can do some decent numbers. 140 health isn't anything to laugh at. You can tank a hit, bounce it back into your deck, draw 3 cards. It's pretty solid. And unlike something like Bibberol, that's obviously a great draw engine, Bibberol's limited to getting a hand size up to 5. The Dunsparce can get you a little bit further. Bibberol's also in certain matchups a bit of a liability, as your opponent will go boss that into the active, pass. If they're stalling a little bit and like need a bit of time to catch up, getting your Bibberol in the active when they know you run low counts as switch, it'll hurt you a bit. If they boss up to Dunsparce, you just go, that's fine. Draw 3 cards, bounce it back into the deck, back into my attacker. It's a good one to have. Obviously need the basic Dunsparce for it as well. 2 colorless energy, dig 30 damage, flip a coin, maybe it's invincible. It's alright. Hopefully you're never declaring that, but it is there if you need it. It also has free retreat though, so it's a great pivot Pokemon if you need in a pinch. Emergency Board seems like a great tool card coming out in the set, and I'd recommend you probably pick up 1 or 2 of these. There's a lot of decks that are going to want to run the high counts of it. Lost Box, it's going to be a good one in there, as it's going to reduce the retreat cost of the Pokemon it's attached to by 1. If it's got 30 health or less, though, it's got free retreat. So if you're getting basically knocked out, you really need to bail out of the active, Emergency Board's there to help you out. But that 1 retreat reduction is usually fine enough as it is, because your stage 2 guys, like your Charizard, Charmander has 1 retreat, chuck it on there. It's in a great position. Also, there's times where you want a starting Pokemon that has some sort of ability. It's going to say Mew from Celebrations, but that will be rotated. Likely be something similar to that being printed in the future though. So having this just as an option to be able to use that, bounce it out, it's good. Reducing retreat cost is always solid and just means you don't need switch as much, right? Like this is effectively a repeatable switch. It's a great card to pick up. Definitely recommend having 1 or 2 of these in your collection as a tech. And yeah, I was trying to show these other 2 cards, but the program I'm using is being a little bit funny. So just going to do something else, and let's hope this works how I've intended it to. 4 copies of Morty's Conviction. That's one of the ones that wasn't able to be shown. So it's going to let you discard a card and draw a card for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Getting straight draw is really powerful. We have things like Colress that are currently seeing play in some Stage 2 decks, because if you have a rare candy or you have a Charizard EX and you want to dig into the other piece, you'd go Colress to hopefully dig into it while holding on to the one you already have. Morty's is just a better way to be able to do that. You ditch 1 card and straight draw into however many things your opponent's benched. It's definitely a solid draw supporter to have. The Ace Specs, obviously just 1 copy of those. Iron Lead's grabbing 2. The Dunsparce line, probably just go for a 2/2, and the Emergency Board picking up 2 copies of those. And next, we're going to be covering the tech cards that I think you guys should be picking up. So these, it's not necessary for everyone to have them, but they're definitely worthwhile having. If you pull them from packs, hang on to them, and if you're just trying to grab everything that you can that might come up, these are going to be the ones that you want. First thing we're going to talk about is Fluttermane. So it's an ancient Pokemon, 90 HP, not bad stats on there, but the ability is why I think it's a great tech, as Fluttering Dusk is going to shut off your opponent's active Pokemon's abilities. This is slotted in the active. They have, let's say, a Charmander, they're trying to rare candy up into a Zard. They're not going to get energy if they do that, so they now have to get it onto the bench and then get it out that way. Can be a little bit frustrating. Also into Lost Box, just being able to have this sat in the active, and it's like, well, your Comfies can't do anything. Not bad. Chin-Pow in the active, also can't do anything. It means they have to gust around this. Escape Rope has rotated by the time that this is going to be legal for play, so they don't have a quick way to be able to do it. Meaning they either have to burn their Ace Spec of Prime Catcher to bounce this out, or they have to waste their supportive return using Boss to get this out of the active. Definitely a great card, and can buy a bit of time when you're trying to set up. Maybe you need a turn or 2 to get going. You can make it so your opponent needs 2 or 3. So, solid tech card to have. The new Relicanth we're getting can also see some play. So I think it's a good one to have in your collection, because there's going to be times where this can come up and it'll be really helpful. It allows you to use your previous evolution's attacks. So the big ones that come up, well, at least to my mind, there's an Incineroar. It can use the previous evolution of, I was going to say Torracat, but I think that's the stage 1, the Litten. So Litten has Reprisal. For each damage counter on it, it can do 20 damage. If you can have an Incineroar in play, if you can have Relicanth able to make it so it can use it, you're in a good way. There was a single prize one that was able to do it as an attack. It let you copy the attacks of previous evolutions, but now we're getting an EX in this set, and Relicanth can allow it to use that. So that seems pretty solid. Also, likely some other decks where this will come up in the future. There's a new Chatot as well. It's got the attack Acapella, which at first you might be like, why is this in here? It's not that great. Well, Buddy Poppen's replacing Battle VIP Pass for single prize decks. 2 prize decks don't really have a way to rush out basics. So this is a way that you can try and get multiples out. You can also just try and set up a board of single prize guys with this as well. Ones that have more than 70 HP might be in a bit of a tough spot. Having just like 1 copy of this for your collection, I'd definitely say it is at least worth keeping in mind. There's not going to be a lot of times where this will come up, but there'll be those decks where it's like, I just need that 1 extra thing to flood my bench, and Chatot can do that for you. The second attack, it lets you do a little bit of damage. It's nothing really big. It's mostly in here for effectively the Call for Family attack that's kind of boosted. You don't only get single prize Pokemon. You can get the EXs. It seems like a worthwhile inclusion. This one, the Beldum, it's in here for the evolutions, let's be real. You've probably seen these guys. The Metang having a dual core. I don't think that's what it's called now. I believe it's called Metal Maker. Just played it at a pre-release, got the promo of it today. It's pretty solid. Once during your turn, you can look at the top 4 cards of your deck, choose any number of basic metal energy you find there, and attach them to your Pokemon in any way that you like. It's not limited to just going to Steel-type Pokemon, so if you have decks that use a lot of colorless energy for your attack costs, Metang can help you kind of get into those. The other thing, it's not going to make you fully shuffle the deck, you're just going to put the cards that you didn't attach on the bottom of your deck, so you can just kind of be thinning. You can have multiple Metangs in play, and it's like, hey, you have 3, cool. You're effectively going to look at the top 12 cards of your deck, and any Steel energy you find there are getting attached to your guys. Also makes it so Steel decks do seem like they have a bit more viability. Dialga V-Star, for example, having something that can get set up a little bit faster than the Magnezone. Magnezone, it was similar ability, lets you dig further, but it was a stage 2, so you needed the rare candy, you needed a Magnezone. Is a little tricky. This is just, can you find that stage 1? Neat, get going. It seems solid. Dialga being able to go 220 into like a Luminion or a Squawk ability, take a KO for 2 prizes, then the following turn use its first attack and just delete something else. It's cool. But the fact that Metang can be setting up basically anything with colorless attack costs is definitely worth having. The Metagross also, if you're going to be running the Metang, having 1 copy of this just to be a backup attacker in a pinch, it's not a bad call. 200 damage, you're going to have to ditch 2 energy if you use the attack. The first attack though 60, and then the next turn 60 more. Only goes up to 120. That isn't a snowball effect, so it's just 60 extra on top of the base damage of the attack. Keep that in mind, but if you're running the Metang as a 4/4 line, having 1 copy of this is probably a worthwhile idea. We're getting a new Magcargo, which it might seem a little odd to people at first that I have this on here, but it's just to help you kind of fix up numbers. So the ability Lava Pools makes it so that whenever your opponent's active Pokemon moves to the bench during their turn, the new active Pokemon's burned. So if they're trying to run away from being knocked out, they're going into something else, or even if they're just trying to get set up, like maybe they had something in the active with an ability they wanted to trigger and then they bounced into their actual attacker. When there are new things coming up, getting burned, they're going to be taking 20 damage at the end of the turn. So it's going to help fix up some numbers, because burn, only doing 20 extra damage, it's not massive, but it's that little bit of a chip that could come up. Having this as a 1/1 line in a deck doesn't seem like a bad idea, instead of running something like a Vitality Band or like a Defiance Band, since those are a bit more situational, and this is going to be doing 20, and it's just sitting on your bench constantly applying that burn. It does have a 4 retreat cost though, so it is a bit of a liability being able to be bossed into the active, and then it's like, pass, you can't do anything. I can definitely see this coming up though, so if you pull it, hang on to it. If you're buying everything that seems like it has potential, this is probably going to be like a 25-cent card. Definitely recommend picking up 1 or 2 of these, as well as the pre-evolution Slugma. The next one is Rabsca. This one has people a little bit divided. We have Manaphy, we have Jirachi. Rabsca is basically just take those 2 cards, put them into 1, except it's a stage 1. So if you knock out the basic before you get it online, you're in a bad spot. Thing is though, Jirachi and Manaphy will eventually rotate, and at this point in time, this is the next bench protection that we have. So it protects your bench Pokemon from attacks and effects from attacks. So if they're sitting on the bench, they're not going to get, well, spread damage. They're not going to be able to get hit with damage counters. It's definitely a good card. It's just compared to things that we currently have, not that great. Also going to mention on this one, this is a proxy that I made, so it does say HP on there twice. I think this was one of the first proxies I made and messed that one up a little bit, but I'll own that. Also, if you're picking this up, you will need to get Relor. It's one of those ones that in the future could definitely see play, and I'd recommend picking it up while the price is cheap, as opposed to when it becomes our bench protection and the price might go up. Another one is Saucebucks. So it's got the ability Seasonal Change. Once during your turn, you can search your deck for a stadium card, just put it into your hand. Having this as like a 1/1 index seems fine. Especially if we get another stadium out the power level of like Path to the Peak. Just having a guaranteed way to that, it's like, I have a way to guaranteed get this. I have a guaranteed way to bump your stadium. It's good. I wouldn't like recommend high counts of it in a deck. Again, it's probably one of those things that it'll be slotted in as like a 1/1 and very, very situational. It's not going to go in every deck, but it's one of those things that in the future, this could come up and you're just going to want to have it in your tech folder. So having like a 1/1 copy, it's probably also going to be one of those like 25-cent cards. And if you pull it from a pack, make sure to hang on to it, as well as the pre-evolution Deerling, so you can actually use it. Hand Clippers, an item card that I'd recommend everybody gets. Both players discard their hands until they only have 5 cards remaining. There's a lot of decks that do kind of build up their hand size, right? Lost Box, for example, there's a lot of times where you'll be looking at your opponent and they've got like 14, 15 cards in hand, and it's like, huh. Well, I'm just going to get rid of all those. It's cool. This as just like a one-off index. If you have deck space, seems like an alright idea. It's not going to go into every single deck, but having it as a tech, it's definitely worth picking up, especially if you're a control player. You're going to want a lot of these. I'm not big on control. There's a lot of control cards that we won't be talking about today, mainly because I don't want to put ideas into people's heads, but this is one that pretty much any deck could slot it in as a one-off if you really wanted to. Order Box, another one of those ones. It's going to be very situational, but as a tech card, seems like a good one to kind of have in your folder. So if you use this card, your turn's going to end. Keep that in mind, but you get to search your deck for 2 item cards and put them into your hand. So if you're a deck that's not attacking the first turn of the game, prime example, Chin Pao. Use Chin Pao's ability, you get energy out of the deck, then you're probably just going Arita, you're getting an item, you're getting a water Pokemon. That's fine. But if you're getting an item and getting a water Pokemon and it's not an item you're using instantly, like Rare Candy, you're probably hanging on to it for the next turn, unless it's your second turn of the game and able to do it and evolve up, then like that's the go-to, obviously. If you're not able to do anything though, if you're going second and able to support her first turn, being able to grab an Order Box to then get a Rare Candy and something else, seems like pretty good value. So it is one of those things, it'd probably just be a one-off index, but there is definitely times where this could be coming up. Having it in your folder, it's not going to be breaking the bank, probably a 25-cent card, and definitely worth picking up a copy or at least hanging on to it if you do pull one. Also, control decks are gonna love this card. Snorlax is never declaring attacks. Your turn is always going to end with nothing happening. You may as well be getting item cards off of it. Heavy Baton, this one, it's sick. So you can only put it onto a Pokemon that has exactly 4 retreat cost, which at first you might be like, well, there's not a lot, until you remember, oh, Iron Hands is a hefty boy. He could use this. Oh, Torterra is a hefty boy. He could use this. But that one's more so, that pops into my head. Other people are probably like, what does Torterra even do? I like him. You know, I think he's neat. Iron Hands, though, it's got 4 retreat. If it gets knocked out, you're losing a lot of that energy acceleration you had. And with Flaffy rotating, you don't have a great way to get it back onto your bench to get another attacker going. You're going to be hoping to hit electro generators, and that's just not doing enough. This is going to allow you to move 3 basic energy cards from the Pokemon that got knocked out onto one of your bench Pokemon. So Iron Hands gets knocked out, move 3 of those lightning energy or whatever basic energy onto another Iron Hands, attach again, and you can kind of just keep rolling. Maybe not even onto another Iron Hands. Maybe you check it onto a Miraidon or something else, so you always have an attacker and you're keeping pressure on your opponent. Definitely a card I recommend everybody picks up. It's not going to be going in every deck, but I think it's going to be seeing play in enough decks that you want at least 1 or 2 copies of these. Usually with tool cards, I pick up 2 to 4 copies of them, unless they're a little bit pricey and not in decks I'm going to be running, but I definitely recommend hanging on to these if you pull them and picking them up if you're looking for techs. And it looks like the computer has got to another funny point and we're getting a blank. Skip that one. Next up, we've got Salvatore. It's going to let you search your deck for a Pokemon that evolves from one of your Pokemon, as long as it doesn't have an ability, and just immediately evolve into it. Doesn't end your turn, doesn't do any of that nonsense. So you could effectively go from a basic to a stage 1 the first turn of the game if you're going second, and there's a few things that you can be going into that then prevent your opponent from being able to play the game, right? Like Venomoth doesn't have an ability. 1 grass energy, your opponent can't play item cards. If you know that they need Rare Candy to play the game, well, that sucks, because they're not going to be able to do that, and now you're in a really strong position. There's also a Bronzong coming out in this set that 1 Psychic Energy attack, I think it's same thing, 30 damage, but then your opponent just can't evolve. So like if you could go second consistently and being able to pull off Salvatore, running it as like 4 copies in the deck, it seems like a great inclusion for a number of decks to have. Also, if you're going into things that, wow. Torterra. Well, we're going to talk about him again. I like him. So if you're going on your second turn, you manually evolve up into the Grottle. You can use Grottle's ability, get another Grottle, start setting up your bench that way, but then you just go Salvatore onto the Grottle in the active. It has an ability, but the Torterra you're evolving into doesn't. And then all of a sudden you're online and ready to attack. You're not having to worry about rare candies to get into it. You're able to get the Sundrent Shell off to be able to consistently set up your bench a little bit more, but you're still getting an attacker out immediately. It seems pretty solid. Bianca's Sincerity, another tech card I'd recommend people pick up, probably just as 1 or 2 copies. You get to heal all damage from one of your Pokemon as long as it's got 30 or less health remaining. So when there is those decks that you go into them and you know they're not going to be able to one-shot you, Bianca's is a great one-off to include. There's also a Ace Spec that's been revealed that if you get hit, you go down to 10 health as long as you're at full health. So Bianca's then just like, hey, fully heal that off. It's not going to be one that's included in every deck, but there is going to be decks that see this card and they're like, that's amazing. and I like that it's been printed. So 1 or 2 copies of these. If you pull them, I'd recommend hanging on to them, or if they're like 25 cents to 50 cents, worthwhile picking up. The new stadiums we're getting, also going to recommend everyone gets these, as they seem pretty solid. Dangerous Jungle is going to make it that during Pokemon checkup, you're going to put 2 extra damage counters on poison Pokemon. We've got Brute Bonnet that can very easily poison the active Pokemon. I think you just need a Ancient Capsule. Cat's got my tongue. Ancient Capsule attached to it, and then you poison their active. This is going to go cool. They take 3 damage counters from it. You can go into his Radiant Sneasler, put another 2. All of a sudden, you're doing 50 extra damage between turns from poison without even like having done the attack yet. So you do an attack, scales up damage. As a way to scale up damage, this definitely seems worth picking up. Talked about the Mag Cargo, how boosting it by 20 is good. And that was, hey, your opponent has to switch into things on a stage 1 and it needs to be under your bench. Dangerous Jungle just seems like a more consistent way to boost up some damage, and I definitely recommend everybody picks up 1 or 2 of these. We're getting Full Metal Lab as well. If you like steel decks, if you like tanky decks, I'd recommend picking this up as a tech. This one's probably a bit more situational and not for everybody, but if you do pull it, definitely worth hanging on to, as your steel Pokemon are going to take 30 less damage from attacks, and that just seems great. I like it when we see tanky steel guys, and they're kind of just like, hey, let's lean into it. Let's make tanky steel guys, and I'm for it. We've got Cooperage EX that takes less damage. We got Revroom that takes less damage after attacking, and you can chuck 4 rigid bands on it. Effectively, Full Metal Lab is a 5th rigid band, and then when it attacks, it's like a 6th rigid bands on there, so you're taking 180 less. That's a little silly, and I'm for it. We're getting the new Ace Specs, Neo Upper Energy. I'll be honest, I haven't seen any decks kind of pop out to me where I'm going to say, yeah, you need Neo Upper Energy for it. That doesn't mean it won't happen in the future. If you pull this, worth hanging on to. If you see it for cheap, worth hanging on to. The Ace Specs, it's also one of those things. It's probably good just to have 1 copy of each, just for like your deck building binder. If you're just looking at pieces for specific decks though, this is likely one you can kind of skip over, I'll be honest. The other Ace Specs though, Master Ball, this one we have seen play. It's not as large as obviously like Prime Catcher. Lugia is running it though, and there's going to be other decks that are going to want to have this. It's basically Ultra Ball without having to discard any cards to use it. It's a great card. If you pull it, hang on to a copy. Don't rush out the door to pick one up, but if you see the price kind of drop in the future, I'd recommend grabbing it if it's like $2-3, because you never know when it's going to come up for that deck you want. This is just a tech card. It's not going to be for every deck. For every deck, we already covered the staples. There's the 2 Ace Specs in there. Those are the ones I'm recommending everybody gets. This is more so, hey, keep an eye out for it, and it's likely worth picking up. All right, and the computer's being a little funny again, so we'll skip over that one. And Reboot Bot. Same thing, if you like future decks, it's a great Ace Spec to have. For each of your future Pokemon in play, you can attach a basic energy from your discard pile and attach it to those Pokemon. So if you have 6 in play, if you have 6 basic energy in the bin, you can rush it out to all of them. It seems like a great inclusion for decks. Prime Catcher's likely going to still be the better card, but if you're going for a like full-on future deck build, Reboot Bot's definitely worth having to be able to include in those. And Drum of Awakening, same thing, but for ancient style decks. You're going to draw a card for each of your ancient Pokemon in play. It's not a supporter for turn, it's just straight draw, and then you can still use a supporter, so you can effectively straight draw 6 if your entire bench is full of ancient Pokemon, then use Sada to accelerate energy out and draw 3 more cards. It's pretty cool. Gonna show you guys now the, obviously, full list of those. Shouldn't say obviously, maybe I'm keeping them up my sleeve, but the full list of those cards, if you are wanting to take a picture of them, is here. Let's try that again. The full list of those, if you're wanting to take a picture of those, is... That's still not right. Here. So these are the ones that I think are worthwhile techs. I think there was a couple of them that didn't quite pop up when I was trying to go through them one at a time. Hero's Cape being one. It's going to boost your health by 100. For tanky decks, it's going to be cool. For like solid single prize decks, being able to boost them up a little bit further, also not a bad idea. Like single prize Torterra, I could see that coming up in there. And I think the other one we skipped over was the Discoverer's something. What's his name? Let's see. I can at least see it. Explorer's Guidance. So Explorer's Guidance, it's sort of like Chorus. You're going to look at the top 6 cards of your deck. You get to put 2 of them into your hand, but then you're discarding the other 4. It's helpful for ancient box decks that are coming out where you're wanting to have things in the discard, and also just for a little bit more straight draw. So like you could replace Chorus You're not lost zoning things, so you could be getting back into those cards, and you're getting to see one additional one. So for decks that are running Colress for that purpose, I could see this replacing it. It's not going to be in every deck, but having 4 copies of it for that purpose, it's not bad. And in the future, it may become the greater replacement for it. We already have Morty's though, where it's just ditch 1 from hand, potentially draw up to 5. I think that's probably the stronger card if you are going for that functionality, but it's definitely one to keep your eye on. All right, and next we're going to talk about the new decks that are coming out of the set that seem like they have some potential. Some of them are a little bit more rogue than others. As there is a high number of them though, I'm just going to show you guys the full list. We're going to kind of skim over the archetypes. Don't think that we need to go into too much detail. If any of them catch your eye, look out for videos that will be covering them, or if you want a little bit more context around them, let me know in the comments down below, and happy to answer any questions you guys have. The main ones though, there's the Ancient box deck that's coming out in this set. So you're going to be getting the single prize Roaring Moon, 2 dark energy, 10 damage for each Ancient card in your discard pile. It's not limited to Pokemon, so item cards, supporter cards, energy, if we get a Ancient energy in the future potentially, it'll be applying for that. So you can be doing some pretty solid numbers with it. Single prizer, it helps fix up some matchups. It's also a great inclusion to have just into regular Roaring Moon decks to help out into like Lost Box and stuff like that, where you don't really want to have a 2 prizer out for them to knock out. Being able to go into a single prizer that they're going to struggle to deal with, it's a great option. The Koraidon also, mainly in there for that Ancient box deck. Fighting energy and a colorless, it's going to do 30 damage for each Ancient Pokemon in play, potentially doing 180 damage for just 2 energy on a single prizer. It's nice. The Fluttermane we did talk about earlier as a tech card, but if you're going for that Ancient box deck, since you do want a bunch in the discard pile, having that Fluttermane as a higher count isn't a bad idea. And then there's the single prize Sandy Shocks that can kind of help out just for some type coverage in that deck, and also makes a great inclusion for the Raging Bolt deck. Raging Bolt, you basically just get a bunch of energy out, have Sandy Shocks EX in play to be able to get energy from the discard pile onto it once your opponent's down to 4 prizes or less, and then you're going to do 70 damage for each energy you discard from your Pokemon in play. So it's like Chin Pow, but a little trickier to set up since you do need multiple types of energy. You need a lightning and a fighting to get it going, but you don't need to get a stage 2 online to be able to accelerate all those energy out. You can be using Professor Sada, you can be using Sandy Shocks, you have other ways to get it going, which is awesome. There's also the Koraidon EX in this set that seems like an alright inclusion for that. It effectively has a revenge attack, so 2 colorless energy, 20 damage, and then 10 more damage for each damage counter on this. So if it's got a Ancient boost capsule on it, you tank a hit, you can kind of just return hit into something. The second attack though does 280 damage, so you can be one-shotting Pokemon V-Star, which is pretty solid. 2 fighting energy and a fire. So if you were running Raging Bolt, you're going to have the fighting energy in there already. You want multiple fighting energy for Sandy Shocks to pull out. Then it's just, hey, do you want to include like 1 or 2 basic fire energy that you can use Earthen Vessel to get into, or maybe even Luminous energy that can be covering the fighting or lightning cost for Raging Bolt, or the fire for Koraidon? It seems like an interesting idea to have in there and could definitely help out in some matchups. The Future Box deck also seems like a solid archetype coming out of this set. So there is the Koraidon that has a colorless energy, 40 damage, accelerate 2 energy from your deck to your future Pokemon as you like. It's nice, especially when you have Iron Crown in the deck with it, that's going to make your future Pokemon do 20 more damage. So if you have like 2 of those on your bench, for example, your Koraidon can be doing 80 damage and knocking out a Charmander in the active while setting up your other attackers. It's pretty solid. And then you're just getting those energy onto like an Iron Hands to mess some things up. Iron Crown's going to be boosting his damage up as well, or you can be setting up your other attackers that are potentially the Iron Boulder, helpful into the RCS matchup, or the Iron Treads, which, if it has a future boost capsule on it, counts as a steel and a fighting type. Its attack does 60 damage, so you need multiple Iron Crowns in play to be able to get up to the numbers needed to hit weakness into things, but it's going to be hitting weakness into Chin Pow, it's going to be hitting weakness into Miraidons, it's going to hit weakness into Arceus, so definitely a solid inclusion for those decks as well. The rest of these are a bit more of the rogue stuff. They seem like they have potential though, and I wanted to give them a shout out because there is a couple of them that I'm planning to build. The Torterra, big fan of the Turtle Club, super keen on it. Torterra EX, 340 HP, is a beefy boy. 1 grass energy, it's going to do additional damage for each grass Pokemon you have in play. You hit weakness into Charizard, it's one of the most played decks at the moment, so it's pretty good. You also just have a bunch of health, so other top tier decks are going to struggle to one-shot you. Like Goldangos, they're going to need 7 energy to deal with you. Chin Pow, they're going to need, I think, also 7 energy. It's a multiplier of 6. 6 times 6 is 360. They need 6 energy. Okay, so that's not as ridiculous, but it's still, you can tank quite a few hits and make people have to really extend to knock you out. You've also got the single prize Torterra to include in there and just have a solid backup attacker. It's going to pair nicely with Whimsicott, since Whimsicott, when you evolve up into it, you can just fully heal your active grass Pokemon. You do have to discard all energy attached to them, but as Torterra only needs 1 energy to attack, you're fine. You're fine. Also, I just realized I didn't say the numbers on Torterra. He scales up by 30 for each grass Pokemon in play, so 180. You're effectively 2-shotting into most things, but you are 1-shotting Charizard, so it's good. The single prize Torterra scales up by 50 for each evolution Pokemon in play though, so can get up to 300, or with the new belt card we have, 350, and you're deleting anything, so that's nice. The Bronzong we did touch on earlier. 1 Psychic Energy, make it so your opponent can't evolve. Evolution decks are going to hate you. There is decks that don't need to evolve though, like, I was going to say Chinpow, they need to evolve for their Baxcalibur. You could slow them down a lot, but eventually they're just going to manually attach and deal with you, and you're not going to be doing so great. Same as Roaring Moon, they don't need to evolve. So the meta isn't fully there for this to be like a competent deck, but you will have matchups where it's just a free win. Like into Zard, if you can get that out turn 1 or turn 2, they're going to hate you, but it's basically a free win. Incineroar, also an interesting archetype coming out of this. Beefy Boy has an ability that for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon, reduce the attack cost by 1 colorless energy. Does 240 damage, hits your opponent, burns them, effectively does 260. You have a belt on there, get it up to 310. If we get something to boost up burn damage in the future, I could see this being a definite threat. At the moment, it seems more like a bit of rogue shenanigans, and if you like cats, you can run it. We do have Relicanth, so you can copy the previous Litten's attack. Did include the new one on here just to pick up 4 copies so that if in the future this is seeing play, maybe the other Litten's rotated, you're going to want to play a set of these ones just to continue being able to play it. But the other Litten having a reprisal seems like the one you're going to want to go for. Gengar, also an interesting deck. I wouldn't say a good deck, but if you like Ghost, it's worth trying to make it work, and I'm definitely keen for it. Its ability makes it so anytime your opponent attaches an energy from their hand to one of their Pokemon, they take 2 damage. Into Baxcalibur decks, that's big. Into things like Charizard or Giratina, where they're accelerating energy from the deck, they're not going to be taking that chip damage, so it does make it a little bit trickier. The attack does make them bounce energy back into their hands, so then they're probably going to reattach, take a bit of chip damage then, and you're just trying to play a bit of a 2-shot game while slowly whittling them down, which is, it's a bit of fun. More of a rogue deck. Like I said, the stuff that you're going to likely seeing play, it's in the top row. Top row, and then like the Iron Boulder and Iron Treads are likely going to be included in decks as well. And last but not least, there's Walking Wake. I'm keen for it. I think it's a bit of a Hail Mary one, but you can do 240 damage if your opponent is affected by a special condition. If we're comboing it with that poison combo we talked about earlier by having the Radiant Sneasler, the new Stadium, and then a Brute Bonnet, you need a Ancient Boost Capsule. Walking Wake's an ancient Pokemon, so it makes sense to include that in there. You're poisoning them. They're taking an extra, how much did we say it was? I think it was an extra 5 from poison. This is doing 240, puts them to 290. You're taking out V-Star Pokemon. Attach that belt to boost it by another 50. You're doing 340. You're taking out stage 2 EXs, or you don't even need that belt on there. It's just, hey, if you don't retreat, you will be knocked out by poison the next turn. So like you're setting up into them. Yeah, they might knock you out, but then they get knocked out as well. And then you just get another Walking Wake, and you're kind of playing that game. So as long as you can get ahead at one point, it'll just tilt in your favor. All right, and next up, we are going to talk about the cards that are going to be updates for decks. There's not a lot. So also figured we just cover these all in one go. Gouging Fire EX seems like an interesting inclusion for Charizard decks. If people start running Iron Leaves as a way to hit you for weakness, you're going to want something that can hit into it and tank a hit and also hit for weakness. It also gets into larger grass Pokemon. So if Torterra does start seeing play, you have a way to just come out and delete it. It's 3 fire energy to get it online, so it is a little bit costly. It does 260 damage though, which it's a pretty good number, especially if you're running the belt in your Charizard deck. That means you can get up to 310 with this. You can be easily dealing with V-Star Pokemon when Charizard in the early game is not doing very much damage. So the Gouging Fire can kind of help you out with that. And seems like a definite one-off to have, at least in your tech binder, and could easily be slotted into the deck. The Roaring Moons, mentioned them earlier in the deck specific or new decks section, but they can also be included in Roaring Moon EX decks. So I wanted to include them on here just as a single prize option you can quickly slot in there. And then the Pidove and Unpheasant. I used to call it Oozifant, and then, yeah, read the card. It's funny what that'll do for you. Unpheasant. Have these on there as a 2-2 because I think they could be interesting into Zoroark V-Star. It's a bit of a rogue deck, but it runs Gapejaw Bog. You bench a Pidove under Gapejaw Bog, it makes it so Zoroark does more damage because it's a damaged Pokemon on your bench. It uses Emergency Evolution. You search your deck, you evolve into an Unpheasant. Unpheasant has free retreat, so it's a great pivot option for you to be able to go into. It would then also have 130 health remaining, so it's not something that Radiant Greninja can easily deal with off your bench. Makes it pretty good. And it has an attack that can be used with a DTE, which you're likely going to be running in Zoroark V-Star. Does 70 damage and makes your opponent put 2 energy from their Pokemon into their hand. Into decks like Charizard, where they're accelerating energy from the deck, they're not really accelerating from hand. If you can bounce 2 of their fire energy back into their hand, that can really disrupt their prize mapping, right? Like if they've evolved both of them up and then it's like, hey, your energy's a little bit funky, I'm going to really mess with that. It can get them into some pretty tricky situations. Because if you bounce it and they don't have a switch card, for example, then the one in the active has no energy. Your next turn, you just boss up the other one. You hit it, you bounce its energy. By that time, yeah, they have likely manually attached to the other one. They manually attach again. They can get going. They likely delete this. But then Zoroark comes up, deletes their Zard, and they're stuck trying to manually attach again to another one to get it going. It's going to take them another 2 turns, or hopefully they can rare candy into another. If they can't, though, you quickly kind of ramp up and just take that one. Very situational if that'll be happening, but it seems like a pretty cool combo to be able to pull off. Mostly in here though, because, well, it's outside of Greninja range, so you don't need to have a Manaphy on your bench. Manaphy being a bit of a liability when it comes down, Gapejaw onto it, 50 health remaining. If you're hitting Sableye decks, they delete it. It's risky. Having this 130 remaining free retreat, it's definitely great to have. The next thing we're going to cover is GLC decks. So I feel like it's something that not a lot of people talk about when they're talking about these new sets coming out, and just seems weird. It's a really fun format. If you haven't played it before, it's definitely worth checking out. Big one here is Bramblegast. I definitely spelled that one wrong. It's supposed to have a S in there, I'm pretty sure. Maybe I'm wrong. I think he's like Ghost Grass though. But he's got the ability Weed Spirit. For each prize card your opponent has taken, this Pokemon gets an extra 50 health. In GLC, it's a single prize format. There's going to be a point where your opponent has taken 5 prizes, and Bramblegast is going to have 250 extra health. I was about to say, no, that's not right. Oh, it is. It sounds broken, and that's because it is. So that means you'd have 350 HP on a single prize Pokemon with like no catch. It's not giving up extra prizes or anything. It's just a bulky boy. The attack is a bit of a Hail Mary. You're going to flip a coin for each energy attached to this Pokemon and do 80 damage for each heads. Grass decks though, you've got ways to accelerate multiple energy out. You've got Rillaboom that gets you 2 energy from the deck. You've got Venusaur that doubles those energies. You've got Cherim that can let you accelerate multiple energies out. So like, let's say this, even with 4 energy on it, you're flipping 4 coins, 50-50 chance, you're usually doing 160 damage on a 350 HP thing at the end of the game. So it's basically like, hey, do you have a way to boss around this, or am I just going to sit here and just beat you up? Probably just going to sit there and beat them up, and it is pretty silly. Obviously, you need to pick up 1 copy of the basic of that, and then the next one we're going to talk about is Turtwig. 80 HP, solid shell, takes 20 less damage from attacks. 100 HP little guy. It just seems like a great Turtwig to slot into your GLC decks if you're running the Torterra line. You go Turtwig into Groddle, and then Torterra is a solid attacker. I feel like most grass decks are running it, so definitely a great one to have to kind of update your decks. The Whimsicott also seems like an interesting one to have, especially if you are going to be running that Bramblegast, because just heal it. You ditch the energy, but then you just go Rillaboom, recharge it. It should be fine. Probably not going to see as much play in GLC as Bramblegast, but I could definitely see this one coming up. And if you're just looking for all the pieces that might be worth having in your GLC box, Whimsicott is definitely worth hanging on to, as well as the Cottony just to get into it. There might be a better Cottony for the evolution. This one's just in the set, so I'd recommend having at least a Cottony to go into. The Bronzong, we talked about it before, being able to make it so your opponent can't evolve. In GLC, most things do want to evolve, and if you can get it out quick enough and just deny them that, you just win. Great card to be able to use in that format, and yeah, pretty silly. Obviously, you need the Psychic type Bronzong. Bronzong was the stage 1, the Bronzor to be able to go into to make it so you can actually run it. There is a Bronzor that you can evolve it first turn of the game if you go second, but unfortunately it is Steel type. You do need to run a Psychic type 1 in GLC. Talking about Steel types though, the Metang seems like a great inclusion for Steel decks in GLC. They don't have a lot of great energy acceleration. There is like the Magnezone, but nobody runs that. You're usually going like Metal Saucer, and then there's also the, well, we just talked about Bronzong. There's a Steel Bronzong that lets you get a Steel energy from your discard pile to one of your bench guys. Very helpful, but Metang just being able to get it before it ends up into the bin, it's pretty solid, and there's definitely some good metacross that you could be going into as well to kind of help you out in that format to justify having it as an attacker as well. The Beldum, there's probably a better Beldum, but just putting it in here for the, hey, if you don't already have one, you'd need one to be able to use that Metang. Buddy Poppin seems like a great inclusion for GLC, as unlike VIP Pass, you can use it throughout the game, so it's not a dead card. VIP Pass, you don't run it in GLC, because if you don't hit it first turn, you've wasted deck space. This, if you're running a lot of evolution guys, being able to grab 2 of them at a time instead of just one of them off like Nest Ball, that's definitely value and a great inclusion for those decks. Heavy Baton also mainly going to be in there for fighting decks and steel decks. They usually have a fairly hefty retreat cost. Also, water decks could get away with this, as if you're running it with Wailord, he's got 4 energy and his retreat cost. Have this on him when he gets knocked out. Move that onto something else that has Hydro Pump, and you're fine. So a great card to be able to use in GLC. And Full Metal Lab for steel decks. Hey, why not have a little bit of extra bulk? Crystal Caves has been seeing some play in there to be able to heal damage off, but it's better just to never take the damage in the first place. So why not do that? That's it for the GLC. Oh, actually, that's not it for the GLC. The computer's being a little bit funny and leaving a couple cards out. Apologies, guys. We'll show you the full list now, though, and go over those last 3 that didn't get included on there. So the last 3 we didn't talk about is the Cryptomaniacs. Being able to just top deck any 2 cards, it's pretty solid, especially when you have cards that are going to allow you to straight draw. If you're running fire decks and you're running it with Salazzle as an example, you ditch a fire energy, you draw 3 cards. If you can guarantee yourself 2 cards on top of that deck that you really need, that's great. The Salvador also for GLC, being able to get an attacker online the first turn, or being able to get something out that can help you get going a little bit faster, it's pretty solid. Like we talked about the Grotto combo in Standard, you could be doing that in GLC, and that just seems pretty funny to me, and I'm all for it. As well as Morty's Conviction, being able to just discard 1 card and straight draw into things is value. Running cards like Professor's Research in GLC can be a little painful. You only have 1 copy of every card in your deck, so if you're discarding your whole hand at any point, it hurts a lot. If you're discarding 1 card to likely draw into a straight 5, that's pretty good value and definitely worth having in those decks. What do you think of these GLC inclusions? Are you going to pick any of them up to update your decks, or do you not really touch the format? I'd love to hear in the comments down below. Now, if you're just wanting to see the full list of what I kind of recommend people buy, or at least what, this is actually just going to be my personal buy list, I'll be completely honest. So there'll be a few things that are in higher counts than I talked about earlier, and there's actually 1 card on there I didn't talk about earlier because it's going to be more of a pet deck if I'm completely honest. Yeah, this is what I'm planning on picking up. What I'm talking about though is the Raichu. You can kind of see it at the middle left over there. It's going to put 50 damage on every damaged Pokemon in play. Yours and your opponent. So it's a little bit of a high risk, high reward type thing. Is it going to be good? Oh, absolutely not. But is it going to be funny and potentially help fix up some numbers? Yeah, it'll be funny. I just like Raichu. He's been one of my favorite guys since I've been playing the games. So yeah. Probably don't pick that one up. But this is my buy list. I'd love to hear what you think. Is there anything on here where you're like, what's that doing on here? Or is there anything that you think I missed? I'd love to know in the comments down below. If you're planning on picking up singles for this is kind of what I'm thinking you guys should be going for though. Definitely pick up the staples mentioned at the beginning of the video. There's a lot in there that if you're not building these specific decks, you really don't need them. And there's some things like the tech cards, so you could probably get away with not picking them up. If you're buying packs, though, yeah, if you pale a Magmotor, definitely hang on to it. If you're just buying singles and really trying to trim down the budget, though, you just need the staples we talked about at the beginning of the video. Only you know the budget that you're working with. Please don't go breaking the bank just because you were like, oh, well, Triple said buy all this stuff. You don't have to buy all this stuff. If you know there's 1 or 2 decks that you really enjoy playing, just get the cards needed for those 1 or 2 decks. Only you know what really fits your playstyle and your lifestyle. That's it for the video though. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, especially if it helped you out in any way, shape, or form. If If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so you can keep up with the content, and until next time, stay golden, you Goombas.